Hello everyone and welcome to this lecture of Programming in C. This is Dr. Reena Shrestha, working as Associate Professor and Dean in the School of Computer Applications at Banaras University. Today in this lecture, I will be talking about nesting of loops. In the previous lecture, I discussed about various types of loop and the purpose for which we use the loops. So let us move on to the presentation to start the topic for today. So in the previous lecture, I discussed that if we want to repeat certain instructions again and again, and if the instructions are of similar type, the task that we want to repeat is of similar type, then we can use loop. Loops are of two types. If we know the number of iterations or the number of times we want to repeat the loop, then we use for loop. And if we do not know the number of times for which we want to repeat the loop and it is based on a particular condition, then we use while or do while loop. So this was the basics behind using a loop. Now let us see how nesting of loop works. So when we studied the topic of control statement, then we discussed that nesting means to embed one statement within the body or within the block of another statement. So same is the case with loops. If we want to nest one loop within another loop, then what we do is we embed one statement within the block of another statement. Let us see this with the help of this while statement example. We have embedded one while loop within the block of another while loop. So here, this while loop with the block starting with this bracket and ending with this bracket, this is the outer while loop and it works on test expression. And we have the second while loop with test expression 2, which is embedded within the block of this outer while statement. So this is the outer while statement and this is the inner while statement. Now how does it work? For every iteration of this outer while statement, this inner while statement will completely execute. So it will complete all its iterations for a single iteration of this outer while statement. So let us see the example of for loop also, and then it will be much more clearer. So for loop also we have similar type of structure. This is the outer for loop and this is the inner for loop. We can have nesting up to many levels. I have shown just one level of nesting. So this is the outer for loop and this is the outer for loop and this is the inner for loop. The outer for loop is working on loop variable I and the inner for loop is working on loop variable j. Now the outer for loop is starting from 1, the value of I is 1 and it is going till the value of I is 4. So it will execute 4 number of times for the different value of I as 1, 2, 3 and 4 as shown here. Now for every value of I, we will have one iteration of the outer for loop and for that value of I, we will have the complete iterations, all the iterations of the inner while loop. Now if we see the inner while loop here, we are starting the value of j with 1 and we are going till 5. So this inner while loop will execute 5 number of times and for every iteration, outer iteration, this will execute 5 number of times. We have fixed it because of these conditions. We are starting from 1 and we are going till 5. So this inner while loop will execute 5 times for every iteration of I. Now we have I've depicted it here with the help of the values of I and j. So for value of I, the value of j will be from 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Again for the second iteration of I, when the value of I is 2, the value of j will be 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. For 3 also, for 4 also, we will have the value of j as 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So for every outer iteration of I, the inner for loop with j loop variable or j counter variable, it will execute 5 number of times with the value of j as 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And this block of code 2 will execute those many number of times. This block of code 1 is part of this outer block. And so for every iteration of this outer loop, it will execute only once. Block of code 2 is part of inner for loop. That's why it will repeat as many number of times as this for loop will execute. So this is the way how nesting of loop is done and how it is used. Now, what are the situations, what are the conditions in which we require such type of arrangements? So if we talk about handling matrices, which is a two-dimensional structure, if we talk about two-dimensional arrays, then we can use nesting of loops to handle such type of data. One more example where we can use nesting of loop is to print certain kind of patterns. So today in this lecture, I will be explaining the printing of such kind of patterns to explain the concept of nesting of loops properly. So now when we print the patterns, what happens is we can see it in the form of a grid structure, which is printed on the screen, and to visualize it, to do the programming more properly, what we can assume is that, or what happens is that this is a single row. Okay. And these are the columns. So the outer for loop that we have, it corresponds to the rows, and the inner for loop that we have corresponds to the column. Now, if we want to print such kind of pattern on the screen, this printing on the screen goes line by line. If we have printed this line completely, then we will move on to the next line and we cannot go back to this line. While using graphics environment, it is possible, but normally it is not possible. So what we will do is, whatever pattern is required to be printed in the first row, we will complete it properly and then we will move on to the next row. After printing all the patterns, all the characters in the second row, then we will move on to the third row. So the outer loop of I will correspond to the rows and the inner loop of J will correspond to the columns. We will keep it to I and J to understand the concepts more properly. Okay. So this is the example. There's one more example of pattern. We can print the pattern in this way. We can print many number of patterns in a different way. We will discuss some of those in this lecture, but rest you have to practice that how we can create different patterns with the help of nested loops. Okay. So let us move on to the editor so that we can make the programs and understand the concept more clearly. Okay, so we have opened the editor and now I will start writing the program. So to start with, I will have the stdio.h header file and then conio.h header file. stdio.h header file is to include all the basic input output functions, and the conio.h header file we use it for a specific function CLR SDR to clear off the screen. Now we will have the main function. This is the basic structure of the main function. Now since we want to print the pattern, what we will do is we will take the number of rows as input from the user and then we will print the pattern according to the number of rows as given by the user, so that we can make a generalized program for printing the pattern. So for that, what we need to do is we need to declare certain variables. We will have the variable I as the loop variable, again the variable j, then we will have a variable nr indicating the number of rows. Now we will use the function CLRSCR to clear off the screen. Now we will print a message to the user to enter the number of rows. Now I will use a scanf statement to read the value of number of rows. So we will pass the nr variable with ampersand operator to extract the address of nr variable, because in the scanf statement we pass address of a variable. Now we need to start printing the pattern. So let us first print the simplest pattern that we discussed. So the pattern was, in the first row we were having a single star. In the second row we had 2 stars. In the third row we had 3 stars, and so on. So let us first write the outer loop for it. For I is equal to 0, for I is equal to 1, we'll start with 1 for the first row. For I is less than or equal to nr, because we need to print nr number of rows, and then I plus plus. This is the bracket for outer for loop. Now we will have the inner for loop in this. For j is equal to 1, j is less than or equal to. Now what should be done for this? I said that j indicates the column. So in the first row, we want to print a single star value, a single star character. So how many columns do we need to move? We need to move a single column. In the second row, we need to print 2 stars. So how many columns we need to move? We need to move 2 columns. Similarly, in the third row, we need to move to 3 columns. In the fourth row, we need to move to 4 columns. So how many columns we are moving, it is depending, for this pattern, it is depending on the row number. If it is row number 1, then we are going till first column. If it is row number 2, then we are going till second column. If it is row number 3, then we are going till third column, and so on. For the row number nr, we will go till nr column. So what we will do is, our j will start from 1 and then it will go till I, because the value of I is indicating the I is indicating the number of indicating the row number and the number of stars to be printed. So our j value will go till the value of I, and we will have j plus plus here. And for every value of j, what we will do is, this is the block of inner for loop. For every value of j, what we will do is, we will print a single star. Okay, I will add a slash t here. This is for tab spacing, horizontal tab spacing. This will create the pattern in a beautiful way. Now, once we have printed all the stars for a single row, now what we need to do is, we need to move to the next row. And for moving to the next row, we need to, while seeing the pattern, if we are moving to the next row, we are moving to the next line. And to move to the next line, we need to add a printf statement here with slash n, because slash n will take you to the next line. So with the help of slash n, we will move to the next line. So where we have added this slash n statement, we have added this after this for loop, after the for loop of j, because this j loop is printing all the required characters for a single row. So as soon as we complete the printing of all the characters in the row, we move to the next row. That's why we have added this printf statement with slash n after this for loop. Let us now add a function getH here to just hold on the screen to see the output. I will save this file. Now I will compile this file. Alt F9. I will run this file with Control F9. Okay, sorry, there is some error. Undefined symbol underscore print. Oh, this is a linker error. Possibly we have used wrong name of the function. Just a minute, where is this error? Let us learn how to debug it. stdio.h tfprint. Okay. Here the name of the function should be printf, and we have written it as print. Okay. So Alt F9 and then Control F9. Now the program is running. Suppose we enter the number of rows as 7 and see the beautiful pattern that we get with this program. Okay. So in the first row, we have printed 1 star, in the second row, 2 stars, in the third row, 3 stars, and so on. So let us go back to the program. Now let us print this pattern in reverse way. In the first row, we will print NR number of stars. In the next row, we will print one less number of stars, and so on. So what we need to do is the outer loop will remain in the same way. The changes that we will do will be in the inner loop. The number of stars for a particular row is getting printed in the inner loop. That's why we will change the number of times the inner loop is executing, and then we will get the desired pattern as we expect. So we are printing the same pattern that we printed right now, but in reverse way, reverse order. So for this, what we need to do is, in the first row, we are printing maximum number of stars. In the second row, we are printing one less number of stars. In the third row, we are printing two less stars. So what need to be done is, our inner loop will start with 1 and it will go till NR minus I. Okay, NR minus I. So this will create a pattern in the reverse order. So let's just compile and run it. Let's see how the output, how we get the output. So Alt F9, Control F9. If we enter the number of rows as 8, so see, this is the pattern that we are getting in reverse order. Now suppose we want to print a pattern with spaces first, with having first spaces and then stars. So what we can say it as, we are printing a right angle triangle, but the right angle is on the right hand side. Instead of having, we have printed triangle right now also with right angle triangle with the right angle at the left hand side. But suppose if we want to print the right angle at the right hand side. So let me just show you the pattern that I am describing. Suppose we want to print such kind of structure. Tap, 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 and then star. Suppose star and then star. Suppose we want to print this kind of structure. So in this structure, what is happening is, we need to print this row, then this row, and then this row. So for this, what we need to do is, for every row, we need to print first some number of spaces and then we will print the star. Because once we move from first row to the second row, we will not be able to move on to the first row. And to reach to this position, to print the first star, what we need to do is, we need to print the spaces and then we will reach this position. Again, in the second row also, we will print some number of spaces and then the stars. Now, we need to find out the correlation between the row number and the number of stars that we are printing, and the row number and the number of spaces that we are printing. Because generally, this correlation only gives you the pattern. So in the previous example also, what we did is, we developed a correlation between the number of stars to be printed and the row number. Okay, so in this example also, we will develop a correlation in between the number of stars to be printed or the number of spaces to be printed and the row number. So if we see the first row here, what is happening is, in the first row we are printing 1 star, in the second row we are printing 2 stars, in the third row we are printing 3 stars, and so on. So the number of stars that is getting printed is same as the row number. But what is happening to the number of spaces? Number of spaces, if we talk about the first row, we have printed 1, 2, and 3 spaces. In the second row, we have printed 1, 2 spaces. In the third row, we have printed one space. And in the fourth row, if we go, we will not print any space. So in the first row, we have printed maximum number of spaces. In the second row, one less number of spaces. In the third row, one more less, and so on. So what we need to do here is we need to develop a correlation in between the number of row number and the number of spaces that we are printing. So if we are having 4 number of rows, suppose if this pattern is for 4 number of rows, let me complete it. 1 star, up star, and then star. Suppose if we have 4 number of rows and this is the pattern. So the number of spaces that is getting printed in the first row, how many spaces is there? Are there 3 spaces. So if we derive a formula, if we take a formula as nr minus 1, nr minus I. So are we getting the required number of spaces with this formula? Suppose let us check it. For the first row, nr value is 4 because we have 4 number of rows and I value is 1. So nr minus 1, we are getting 3 spaces, correct. For the second row, nr value is 4, the I value is 2, so nr minus I, 4 minus 2, we are getting correct number of spaces. For the third row also, the nr value is 4 and the I value is 3, so nr minus I, that is 4 minus 3, it is 1. So we get correct number of spaces. And for the fourth row, it is nr 4 and row number is 4. So we get nr 4 minus 4, it is 0. So 0 number of spaces. So if we use this formula to print the number of spaces, it will work properly. So let me just delete it and change the program accordingly so that it can print the required pattern. Now, for this pattern, one more thing that we need to understand is this inner loop is for printing the stars. But we, before printing the star, in every row, we are printing spaces. So for printing spaces, we will have another nested loop here. So for another nested loop, we need one more loop variable. Suppose we have that loop variable as k. So what we will do is we will start the value of k from 1 and the value of k will go till nr minus I. Okay, and then k plus plus. And in this loop, what we are doing is we are printing spaces. So I will have a printf statement here, printf, and then I will simply put a space here. So, but as for printing stars, I'm using star and then slash t. So for this also, I will use space and then slash t. Otherwise, we will not get the correct pattern. Okay. Now, I need to change this also because for the ith row, we need to print I number of stars. So we need to change the final condition for this J loop also. So let us see whether it works or not. Let me just save it again. Alt F9 to compile it. There are some errors. Declaration terminated incorrectly. Okay. Actually, we just introduced 2 commas here. F9. Again, there is some error. Statement missing. Okay. There should be a semicolon here. Okay. And then control F9. Enter the number of rows. Suppose we enter 6. So this is the pattern. In the very correct way that we expected, we are getting that pattern. Okay. So now let us print one more pattern of type pyramid. What do I mean by pyramid? Suppose we want to print a pattern like this. Star. Suppose we want to print a pattern like this. Now, what we need to do to print such a pattern? Again, we need to print the pattern row by row. So we will move to the first row, then to the second row, and then to the third row. So if we derive the logic for this, like we will print the left hand triangle and then we will print the right hand triangle, this will not work because we cannot move. If we have reached this position, we cannot move back to this position. So what we need to do is we need to print it row by row. So we need to develop a logic that how do we need to print it row by row. So if we analyze this, for every row, what we are doing is we are printing certain spaces and then certain number of stars as we did in the previous pattern. But now the difference is the number of stars that we printed for the previous pattern and the number of stars that we will print for this pattern is different. If we talk about the number of spaces, it is the same. But if we talk about the number of stars, it is different. So how do we correlate the row number with the number of stars for this pattern? In the first row, we have 1 star. In the second row, we have 3 stars. In the third row, we have 5 stars. So if we take a formula as 2 into I minus 1, then definitely we will get the required number of stars. So for the first row, it is the value of I is 1. So 2 into 1 is 2 minus 1, 1. So we got correct number of stars. For the second row, the value of I is 2. So 2 into 2 is 4 minus 1 is 3. So we are getting the correct number of stars. For the third row also, the value of I is 3 and 2 into 3 is 6 minus 1 is 5. So we are getting correct number of stars. So let us see that whether this formula works properly and we get the correct pattern or not. So what we need to do is the loop for spaces is correct. We need to change the loop for printing the number of stars. And instead of I, what we need to do is we need to put here the formula 2 into I minus 1. So let us see by changing this whether the problem gets resolved or not. We need to just change the pattern here. Okay. Alt F9, there is some error. Oh, we just loaded the program from memory. So the changes that we made in the previous program is not visible here. So let us save it. Now we will compile it and then we will run it. So suppose we enter the number of rows as 4. So this is the pyramid pattern that we expected to be printed. So it is printing in a very correct way and properly. Now what we will do is, suppose in the pyramid pattern, we want the characters to be printed alternatively as star and plus. Instead of printing all the characters as star, we want to print it alternatively as star and plus. So we will start in every row, we will start with a star and then the second character will be a plus and then a star and then a plus. So it will change alternatively and we will print the pattern. So for this, what we need to do? Again, we need to think a logic for it. So we are printing the pyramid pattern. So the loops that we are using here is very correct. This will print the pyramid pattern. Where we need to change the logic, we need to change the logic at this particular position where we are printing the star. Because what we need to do is, now we don't want to print a star every time. We want to print a plus or a star based on the column number. So for the first position, we want to print the star and the second position, we want to print the plus. So if we correlate it, if the value of j is odd, we want to print a star. If the value of j is even, we want to print a plus symbol there. So what we will do is, now we will check the value of j. If j mod 2 is equal to 0, What this will indicate is if j mod 2 is equal to 0, this is an even value. And if it is true, then we want to print a plus. So what we will do is we will have a printf statement for printing a plus symbol. Where's the plus symbol? Okay, it is here. And again, we will have a /t here. Close it. And this is it. Now, in the else portion indicates that the value of j is odd and it is not even. So the value, if the value of j is odd, then we will print a star. So we have changed the logic, we have checked the value of j, and based on the value of j, we are printing either a star or a plus. So let us see whether this is working properly or not. Alt F9, there is no error. Control F9. Suppose we again take the number of rows as 5. So this is our pattern. So you can see here that in the first row we have a single star. In the second row, the first character is star, the second character is plus, the third character is star. In the third row, the first character is star, the second is plus, third is star, fourth is plus, and the last is star. So this character star and plus are getting printed alternatively in the pattern, the pyramid pattern that we have printed here. Okay. So in this way, we can change our logic a bit, and then we can print many number of patterns. So you can print a rhombus from this, you can print hollow triangles, hollow squares, hollow rectangles, you can print squares, you can print rectangle, you can make many different kind of patterns with the help of such nested loops. What you need to do is you need to develop a correlation between the row number and the character that is getting printed, the number of character that is getting printed and the type of character that is getting printed. So all this is about developing a correlation in between the row number and the column number and the characters that you want to print. If you are able to play with these values, then you will be able to print a large number of beautiful patterns. So let us just wind up this lecture with all this. And thanks for watching the video.